Hello and welcome to a new UiPath demo. In this video, we'll cover the basics of selectors in UiPath Studio. Let's begin. We'll start with a brief definition of the concept, and then we'll move on to an example to illustrate how selectors work, what are selectors, and how they're created. Selectors are properties of UI automation activities. They contain the attributes of each graphical user interface element and its parents as XAML fragments. Selectors are generated automatically every time we use an activity that interacts with graphical user interface elements. Let's move on to an example. We'll start by creating a new process and adding a new sequence. Next, we'll add a click activity and indicate the cash amount field in the UI demo application. The informative screenshot helps us see what element the activity targets. However, the robot identifies the target through a unique selector, which can be viewed in the selector editor or in the UI Explorer window. Now, let's examine the attributes of our selector. The GUI element that we clicked on is included in the last line of the selector. All of the previous lines are the parents of that element. The first line is usually referred to as a root node, as it locates the top window of the application. In the UI Explorer window, we can navigate the UI hierarchy tree by clicking the arrows in front of each node to expand or hide the corresponding section. This is how each line in the XAML fragment is mapped in the application interface. The XAML fragment that makes up the selectors contains tags and attributes. Attributes enable us to interact with the UI elements at a specific level of the selected application. Although selectors are generated automatically, they might require some fine-tuning at times to work effectively. Let's quickly go over the cases in which selector adjustments are necessary for the workflow to be executed seamlessly. Firstly, some web pages generate dynamic IDs for the elements that they comprise. To illustrate, we'll use UI Explorer to retrieve a selector from the RPA Challenge web page. We'll indicate the company name field. The element ID is displayed on the last line. However, if we refresh the web page and then validate the selector, we can notice that it becomes invalid. As a result, we'll need to indicate the element again. The value of the ID attribute changes every time we refresh the page, which means that it can't be used reliably to identify the field every time the automation project is executed. Secondly, the generated selectors might be too specific. Picture a case in which we need to interact with multiple similar elements, one by one. We'll consider the example of two PDF invoices. Let's open the UI Explorer and indicate the first file. We can notice that the name of the PDF file is stored in the title attribute. When we select the second file, the selector changes as well because the file name is different. As a result, the selector needs to be changed to enable the processing of both invoices alike. Moving on, selectors must also be adjusted when automating applications that are prone to system changes. For instance, if the version or name of an application changes, the selector attributes must be adjusted in such a way as to identify different versions. Furthermore, some selectors contain an attribute named IDX. This attribute is the index of the current element within its container, which contains multiple similar elements. It's recommended to replace the IDX attribute with a more reliable one for the item to be detected, even if the web page is updated and the indexes become different. Let's return to the RPA Web Challenge webpage to demonstrate this. We'll click Indicate Element and then select the company name field. If we remove the ID, the IDX attribute is displayed instead. We can highlight the element to make sure that it's the one that we clicked on. And everything looks good. But what happens if we refresh the web page without updating the selector? We can notice that a different element is highlighted this time. This is because the order of the fields has changed. In such cases, the IDX attribute is unreliable. And that concludes our demo. Let's quickly recap the key takeaways of this demo. Selectors are properties of UI automation activities which help the robot identify UI elements. They contain the attributes of each graphical user interface element and its parents as XAML fragments. Selectors can be viewed and edited from the Selector Editor or UI Explorer. Some examples when selectors require fine-tuning are when the target elements contain dynamic IDs, when the selectors are too specific, or when they contain IDXs. Thanks for watching and happy automation!